Hello and welcome to the Rugby Chat podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite podcasting app so drop into your phone every single week. And if you are watching, if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, then obviously please give us a 5-star review, even though other stars are available. If you'd like to watch what happens behind the covers, the show's live on YouTube at 8 PM New Zealand time every Tuesday. And you can also join the discussion on our 5 questions via Twitter. Just follow @DrivingMaul. Look out for the questions and use #RugbyChat. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. So thank you very much for joining me. Tonight, we'll be talking about snow, Scottish invasions. What else are we going to talk about? Some All Blacks and all of that kind of stuff. So kicking us off, let's start off with that whole Scottish invasion kind of thing. And what am I talking about? Well, basically, there has been a rumour that Scotland are looking at taking over Worcester Warriors, apparently. So should unions be allowed to buy into other unions' competitions? Now, for those of you that don't know, Worcester Warriors are in the Aviva Premiership. And they are, so that's the English top flight competition. And they've been up for sale for a couple of months now. They are one of the teams that has been struggling with relegation over the last couple of seasons, but managing to keep themselves their heads just above water. And it looks like the return of Francis Hugard, and I've forgotten who it is they've gone at the number 10 who's arrived, is going to save them yet again, and they're going to finish just above London Irish is people's expectations currently. But they are a team, as I say, that have been struggling at the bottom end of the table for a few years now, and not being able to sort of get themselves further up the table. Next year with Bristol coming up, that again looks like it is going to produce another challenge for them, as Bristol look a lot more prepared this time around than they did last time. So keep a look out for that. Obviously, Bristol will be making Charles Piutau the highest paid player in the world next year, to give you an idea as to why I say they're going to be more prepared next time. So interesting that the SRU, or Scottish Rugby Union, are looking at investing into this club. Now, one of the things you've got to remember is that only one club in the Aviva Premiership turned a profit last season, and that was Exeter Chiefs. So Worcester Warriors are a club that has been losing money to the tune of several million over the last 5 years. So also the last 3 years or so. This was from what I understand. But this will give, the Scottish Rugby at the moment is supported by 2 teams, Edinburgh and Glasgow Warriors. So interesting that Worcester Warriors, again, another Warriors side. So a bit interesting they've chosen the same kind of nickname. But it's going to be interesting. So, but what this will give them is access to the Aviva Premiership TV money, because Scotland can't afford to bankroll another professional team in Scotland. They tried that with Borders a long time ago, and that unfortunately ended up collapsing. So what they're looking at doing is, from what I can see, is giving themselves a greater depth of players by having a 3rd professional team, but using the Aviva Premiership money to help fund it, not fully fund it, because as I've just said, Worcester Warriors makes a loss. So Scottish Rugby are still going to have to put money into it. But the idea behind it is that they will be putting in less money than having to pay for a full team at home, and so we'll be able to hopefully keep hold of some of their players. As Chris Simpson says, it's got to be a no. We shouldn't be allowing unions to buy into other unions' competitions. He says if they have the money to buy and run a club in England, they would surely be better off giving more money to Edinburgh and Glasgow to keep the likes of Finn Russell. There is that, but they need the extra club. We've seen what happens to Argentina when they've only picked from one club, the Jaguares, and how their decline since the last Rugby World Cup when they picked their European players from many clubs. And Scotland does have that problem of depth, especially in the national side, because they only have those 2 teams. Sure, they do pick players who play outside of Scotland, but they generally like to have them in Scotland and have control and access to them. So at the moment, it's going to be interesting to see whether the RFU do allow them to do that or not. Rugby Scotland says SRU are already feeding players through London Scottish and have programs with teams in France. So yes, the London Scottish one I think turned sour, and also did have an agreement there. I thought that one had collapsed. and so I thought they couldn't go through them anymore, which was why I thought they were choosing Worcester Warriors over that. So I'm not sure about that one, about the London Scottish side of things. But it does seem strange to see a club, see a union buying into another union's competition. It will be interesting to see what the RFU's view is. The feedback on Twitter, Peter Redmond also has said no. So there's a couple of people who think this is just not a good idea. So, yep, I don't know what's first. We'll see if it does go through. So I don't know about that London Scottish connection. I thought that had fallen through, but I can see why they're doing it, because they want to get access to the Aviva Premiership cash, TV cash, which is a lot higher than the Pro 14 receive for their competition. Moving on then to question 2, and we're going to start talking All Blacks now. One of the things that we've seen over this year is everyone's been saying how the All Blacks have not looked as invincible, and part of that has been down to injuries. They've been missing their entire front row, for example, on the Northern Hemisphere tour, as well as players like Retallick as well. So they've been playing with only half their first choice scrum for a lot of this time, and the depth has really told. So with Shields and Kano are rumoured, sorry, the latest players rumoured, in fact, Shields actually has signed that he's going to go to Wasps to be leaving New Zealand. Are the stocks starting to run low for the All Blacks? And people will say, oh, there's always another one just coming off the ranks. But I do think now that we are starting to see, I say, the All Blacks looked more fallible this year. And we saw it because they were bringing a lot of players through. I mean, you've got to say players like Charlie, and I've gone blank as to his surname, which is just awful, who played the prop who used to play for the Blues, has been really missed this season because of the, losing all 3 first choice front row players to injury. We've obviously seen Aaron Cruden has gone, and so we've seen Beauden Barrett pretty much play every single test this year. He's probably the one player that's had the least rest out of the entire All Black squad. Now, yes, he got Player of the Year again, but how long can he keep going with that kind of workload also out of the Hurricanes as well? And I do feel that the All Blacks now perhaps their resources are being stretched a bit. We don't have to go back that far, where there was 2011 Rugby World Cup, where there were calls to have an exception and to bring back a fly half from Europe, because Dan Carter was seen as being so key. In the end, they got over the line with Stephen Donald after several players got themselves injured. But there was definitely a feeling in New Zealand that they didn't quite have the depth that they wanted. And I think we're starting to see and feel a bit of that in some of the positions. Obviously, Shields, they wanted to call up, but he turned them down because he has a ancestral right to play for England, and he's going to look at playing for England at the next Rugby World Cup, and we'll see if that doesn't happen. So there is questions about how the so I think there are some question marks around the depth that we have in the All Blacks currently around certain positions, and fly half is one of those. For some reason, Rich Mo'unga, who plays for the Crusaders, hasn't really been picked and trusted, even though they had a great season for Crusaders. I say Beauden Barrett, therefore, has been asked to do too much. There does look to be, David McKenzie does look to be the next cab off the rank for that, but he's definitely an unproven prospect at 10 for at that kind of level. Also had a bit of a shocker for the Maori against the All Blacks, but that's off the back of not being playing that position all season at Super Rugby. He'll get a full season at Super Rugby next year with the Chiefs at in that 10 position. But they definitely looks to be the player, the third fly half, as Sopoaga didn't really produce the kind of form that I think the All Blacks were looking for. With with Cruden leaving, and with the Blues really not having anyone at the moment, because let's be honest, West really didn't step up. There was a little bit of I think depth issues around that position. Looking at scrum half, Brad Webber was taken on tour as a third scrum half. Now he's off to Europe. So who is going to be that third scrum half going into next season? It's going to be kind of interesting. It's not, the problem isn't so much with that first 15. The first 15 players are being kept in New Zealand comfortably. Even the 23 are being kept in the country comfortably. It's when injuries hit that I think we're seeing depth become an issue for the All Blacks. And we have lots of, we always hear that in sort of the Northern Hemisphere teams, or we have historically heard about them saying that injuries and not be able to have enough players, or not having the depth. But we're seeing them build the depth up in contrast. So I think it's going to be a bit of a, I think there is a problem around the All Blacks going forwards. And I say in the comments, Christian reckons that nope, we still have good depth. I think it's patchy, and we'll see that going into next year. And staying on all things New Zealand rugby, the is Alama Irima. Oh dear, sorry about the pronunciation. That is despicable by me. The man to resurrect Auckland as a Mitre 10 super power, Mitre 10 Cup super power. So yes, Auckland have got themselves a new coach and have announced who he is. Now, he's not someone I know that much about, but apparently he was the coach at Samoa recently, which didn't go down, where he didn't have a great season and had to leave there. And he has got he has got NPC history as well. So he's got experience coming in, and that's fine. And personally, I don't think the problem is at the coaching level, though. I remember having had a chat with one of the Mitre 10 coaches, and I think Auckland's problems are more systemic than just around the coach. There is this view that Auckland have too many players to choose from, and therefore that's a problem. And that's not really true. They've got about 14 probably clubs in their top division, top club competition, and that's where your players are going to be coming from. They're not going to be coming from elsewhere. There is some disgruntlement amongst the clubs, apparently, that players are just jumping straight from the youth systems straight into Mitre 10 Cup and not doing their time at club level. And maybe that is part of the problem in Auckland. Also, is he just going to be a full-time Mitre 10 Cup coaches? Because now, Mitre 10 Cup, when Super Rugby came along, it became semi-professional, with basically the coaches being part-time. So they would do Mitre 10 Cup and then they would become rugby development officers or whatever within the unions outside of that. Mitre 10 Cup has gone back to being full-time professional effectively, and you can't afford to be doing that. I think Auckland is one of those unions that hasn't grasped the nettle and still and doesn't give their Mitre 10 Cup coaches 12 months of the year to concentrate just on that. So I don't really think it's going to be, I don't think he is, I don't think there's any problem with him as a coach per se, but I don't think the structures are in place properly that he's going to be able to be successful and to be give him the best chance of success anyway. They haven't announced his next his coaching staff, and that's all going to be next year. Now, sure, the Mitre 10 Cup is in the latter half of the year, and there's plenty of time to get them in place, but they need to get them in place early and give them nothing else to concentrate on, because unless they do, these guys are going to be rocking up late, not have put the work in properly, and will be playing catch up against the other sides where the coaches do concentrate full time on Mitre 10 Cup and don't have to go away and be distracted with other jobs within the union. So I think Auckland's problems are much more intrinsic than they are just around the coach, and I'm not sure he really is going to be the right man, or on his own. He's going to be able to sort that out personally. So I don't. So yeah, no, I'm not very optimistic about Auckland's chances next year. I will be down in the Taranaki next year, rather than up in Auckland, so I'm not going to get to see them as much as I have this year. But it's going to be interesting to see how they go and if he can step it up. I'm doubtful because of the structures, not because of the person who has been chosen, though. Heading over to Europe, there has been, obviously it's been a European Cup weekend, the European Champions Cup weekend, and 2 seasons ago, England had 5 teams in the Champions Cup quarterfinals. This weekend, they lost 7 out of 7 games. So why has the power shifted, and why aren't the English teams quite as dominant as they used to be, or as they were a couple of seasons back. First up, 2 seasons ago was when the Rugby World Cup happened, and the Pro 14 teams were more impacted, sorry, the Pro 12 teams at that time were more impacted than the Aviva Premiership and top 14 teams. The reason for that is you had 4 countries taking players from that rather than just the one. Also, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and Italy took most of their players from the Pro 12, whereas England took it just from the Aviva Premiership, from those 12 teams. So the impact on the Aviva Premiership teams was less than the Pro 12 teams. The top 14 had signed a lot of players from the Rugby World Cup, and so a lot of the top sides there were waiting for their stars to arrive. And so that lack of disruption, I mean, Saracens that season, I think, only had 5 new players and deliberately kept their squad stable. And I think that had a big piece to that, about the stability of the squads going into that season, whereas the other sides were much more disrupted. So that was probably an anomaly rather than a sign that the Aviva Premiership was becoming the dominant league in Europe. If we just run through the games then from this weekend, Exeter lost to Leinster. So Leinster, obviously, a historied powerhouse in Europe. Exeter, one of the sort of newer up-and-coming powerhouses, and being the English champions. And they had started well in this competition, but this is the first time they've really thought they were going to go well in Europe, whereas Leinster have been doing it for decades now. So you've got to say, yes, that greater know-how there has seen Exeter come undone. So not perhaps a big surprise in there, but you would have given Exeter a good shout at home. Saracens lost to Clermont. Now, there's a lot of stuff around that game, which we'll get into later. But again, not a massive surprise necessarily. Quins versus lost to Ulster. Now, Ulster generally don't go so well in this one, but in this, but Quins are also having a very poor season. So again, it shouldn't be too big a surprise. That one could really have gone either way. La Rochelle beat Wasps at home. La Rochelle going well in the top 14. Wasps having a bit of up and down season, so not a big surprise there that they came up short. Toulon beat Bath, but only by 4 points. That was close, especially as it was at home, and you can definitely see Bath turning them over when they get the return game. Again, both Toulon not having a great season, sat mid-table in the top 14, but Bath also having an up and down season. Munster going well against Leicester, who were going well but have come off the boil a bit. Again, winning over at Thurrock Park is very rare. And Northampton lost to Ospreys, 2 sides that have been having a shocker season, in all honesty. It really just shows you how bad things are at Northampton that they lost to Ospreys, who are going so poorly in the Pro 14. So when you look at the matchups, if Exeter played anyone else but Leinster, and maybe away to Munster, they would have been probably in with a good chance of a win. And so is it as bad as 7 out of 7? No, it's not. I mean, Exeter won their opening 2 games. Saracens won their opening 2 games in this competition. So as did Wasps as well. So there's not Wasps, sorry, as did Bath as well. So there are still quality teams in the Aviva Premiership. But as I say, I don't think they were as powerful as we thought, or as we saw, as the results suggested 2 years ago. And this is perhaps a bit more of a righting of the ship as to where they are now. I mean, there's still teams that should be going through, and Saracens still will be one of the still be up for honours come towards the end of it as well. You don't get to be champions of Europe without having some backbone, even if they seem to be losing their way currently. I'm sure they will bounce back. So no, there are quality teams in the Aviva Premiership. They're not, the power hasn't shifted as much as I suggested. I've just realised I spelled it sifted, not shifted. But there you go. So the power. So for those of you who are following this on Twitter, so the power hasn't moved that far. As that, it's just one of those perfect storms where all the matchups had it that because say Ulster would have lost to Saracens or Exeter, definitely probably also to Bath or even Leicester, to be honest. Whereas they got Quins, who are not one of the strongest sides. So I thought it's a perfect storm, and from all of that. Moving on to question 5, because the Saracens Clermont game has been such a talking point over the last few days. The snow caused the Saracens Clermont game to be postponed. Is it right playing the game behind closed doors? Now, in the end, they didn't play it behind closed doors. And I think that probably goes to show what a mess has been made of this game. First, the only game that got called off was this one. And snow was across Europe. And Harlequins, for example, managed to host their game in London. So it shouldn't have been a surprise that this was that there was snow, that travel would be disrupted. And I think that Saracens perhaps got caught out and weren't planning properly. Clermont would, if you listen to the tone of their tweets, were rather unimpressed that the game was called off, and definitely they thought that it should have gone ahead from the tone of their tweets, or that there should have been better planning in place to make it go ahead. I think part of this comes down to where Saracens' stadium is. Harlequins is obviously opposite Twickenham or HQ, and therefore it's not great transport infrastructure, but they're basically used to having games there for decades. Games in the same way as Saracens are, it's a relatively new stadium, and they are having to deal with local opposition to them growing the stadium, because I know they do want to have it bigger than it is currently. So yeah, there's definitely an element of naivety, I think, in Saracens or the council in that area as to what could happen. Then the game had to be played quickly because there is no space in the European calendar to fit in postponed games, and so it was moved to Monday. Initially, as I say, they said that, look, the snow wasn't going to improve, therefore we would play behind closed doors for spectator safety. And then late on Monday, they came out and said, no, actually, yep, if you got a ticket, turn up to the game. All a bit of a farce. And Saracens got to go away with egg on their faces from this one. They really should be better organised, and hopefully there'll be some learning lessons around this. Should the game be behind closed doors? No. The snow shouldn't have come as a surprise, let's be honest. There are other grounds in London that the game could have been moved to if they had thought about it early enough. Maybe Wembley or even Twickenham could have hosted this game, for example. So why not look at that, or even possibly have hosted it at Harlequins? They played the previous day. So there were, I say, a number of options as to where the game could have been moved to if they'd been more proactive about it. I think they were too reactive. They didn't really think about things through, and made a mess of it. So it should have been played on the Sunday. It may have had to have been moved, but it should have been played on the Sunday, and it should have been played in front of a proper crowd, rather than it being done at the last minute. So shame on Saracens for not getting their act together on that one, I'm afraid. If I'm going to take a bit, even if I may take some flack around that. And we have a bonus question this week, because we've seen a lot of Super Rugby jerseys being announced over the last couple of weeks. And I've got to say, is this the worst season for Super Rugby jerseys? There have been some ones that are pretty poor this time now. And it's not so much necessarily how poor the jerseys are per se, but just some of the really bad choices. The Blues, my team in Super Rugby, have a blue jersey as their home jersey. No surprise there. It's a kind of palish blue, sky blue. And Christian agrees with me, yes, this is the worst year for Super Rugby jerseys. But their away jersey, or their alternate jersey, is also blue. It's a dark blue rather than a light blue. But that's just crazy. And it looks like a funny blue tiger, some kind of thing. It's a joke. The Lions in South Africa, their home jersey is red and white, and their alternate jersey is white and red. It looks like the same jersey, just the other way, just swap the stripes around. That is a farce. The Bulls have decided, hey, if we're going to make sure we clash with 2 jerseys, because we'll have a jersey that on the front is blue and on the back is white. So they're effectively wearing 2 strips in the same time with their jersey, really trying to clash with anyone they can. The Sunwolves, as Christian says, are the worst. They have got a horrible jersey. And people have been suggesting it's like what looks like Godzilla has thrown up or something. It's just a whole bunch of squiggly mess of a jersey. So let's hope they get past that one. With the New Zealand sides, we know that we're going to have to deal with these jerseys for 2 years because they have a 2-year cycle. At least the Sunwolves, hopefully they'll change it after 1 year, and we won't have to see that one again. And those are just the worst examples. There have been other ones that aren't so great, and some that are fine. But this has got to be one of the worst years for jerseys, because not so much necessarily the designs are awful and bad, but because so many teams have seem to be deliberately trying to cause clashes. Last year, there were times when you looked at the scrum and just went, why are 8 people packing down against the same team? And they weren't. Obviously, it was to both sides. But both sides' shirt jerseys were just too similar, or they were, or the referee's jersey was the same colour as one of the teams. Especially the Hurricanes, where the referees in New Zealand tend to wear yellow, and the Hurricanes wear yellow. It was just a bit. They really just need to sort this kind of stuff out. So yes, bad on you, Adidas and Canterbury and the other country companies who are making the Super Rugby jerseys. They're really not very good this year. You need to step up your game. Thank you very much for joining me. A bit of a quick and short one-man show this week. I'll be back next week and every week. I think I'll be able to. That we're going straight through the festive period. So do remember to download the podcast and have a good old listen. Please do share this with your friends. It's always good to to spread the word and to get more feedback and people listening in. It's all much appreciated if you do that. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you get it every week. Thank you everyone for joining me, and I'll catch you next week, or catch me on Twitter @DrivingMaul.